Hello, I'm Richard Burton from the Richard Burton Watercolour channel here at Bempton on the Yorkshire coast. And today we're going to do some splattering, and we're going to show you how we can use splattering, and it's not going to create a mess. We're going to use it to capture mood and atmosphere in a random way, quite an aggressive way, but at the same time using diffused washes, combining the two together to really something quite magical. The scene's going to be a boat, a cobble at Bridlington Harbour, sitting in the morning light with the light, the wet sand and the beach, and you're going to enjoy this. So let's get down to it. Also, if you're new to watercolour or you're coming back to watercolour, I've got our free watercolour starter guide, which has got 5 tips into watercolour. It just gets you started again, it gets you refreshed, ready to watercolour. It's in the link below. All you need to do is download it, print it off, use it when you're getting into watercolour. You find it useful, please have a go and see how you get on with it. Okay, so the scene is a fishing boat out of Bridlington Harbour. It's sitting low water, it's sitting on the bottom of the harbour, the wet sand. You've got that lovely light coming across. It's winter light, so you've got that low light with the big shadows. And we're going to try and capture, not only we're going to capture the light, we're going to try and capture that feeling like wet sand. And we're going to show you how to do it with a really dynamic use of diffused watercolour. Okay, so we've got the paper taped down. It's a 300 gram paper, not surface, so it's got a little bit of surface. And let's get down to the sketching. So what I'm looking at here is the boat sitting on the harbour, sitting on the ground ashore, obviously with the wet sand, as we've already said. But the first thing I need to look is get the proportions right. So what I'm looking at trying to get the bow in the right place. So I'm going to get that bow set up, and then from that I then proportion everything across so that I make sure that I've got the right height for the stern in relation to the bow, and relate everything back to that bow that I've set, so that hopefully everything becomes then proportionate. And I'm going to work on getting the hull of the boat in first, work that through, and then I'm going to work the keel house, and then gradually put a suggestion of the details. But it's going to take a little bit of time, and it just needs to make sure that you're relating everything back to a vertical. But you know, you'll see how it comes, and hopefully we'll try and capture the shape of this cobble. I suppose what I mean by relating it back to a vertical is I'm using literally the bow as the fixed point of the boat, and then I'm working all the shapes back to that, so they all become proportioned back to that. And by doing that, I'm ensuring that at least I capture more or less the shape, and it looks as reasonably accurate as I can make it. So I'm now going to add a little bit of masking fluid just to protect some of the highlights in the painting so that I can put these washes in place. And the things like I'm doing, I'm going to cover some of the stones. I'm also going to cover some of the railings just to ensure that I capture those highlights that I need to protect. And this time I'm using a fountain pen, a glass fountain pen, just to put some details in place. Now this is a sketch I did earlier actually. It's using soluble ink and just a little bit of watercolour, just to try and see if I can capture the scene and how it would look as a very, very rough sketch. Okay, so for today I'm going to use 6 brushes. I've got 1 very large wash, 3 medium wash brushes, and then a couple of small ones. What we're going to do, we're not going to focus on the boat initially, we're going to focus on the wider background. I want to capture all that mood on a moist and diffused paper. So we're going to set our colour story to cover that. What we're going to start with, we're going to start with some blue, which is Prussian blue and a bit of cobalt blue for that initial stab of the blue. And then I'm going to come down, I'm going to have a little bit more cobalt blue, and then I'm going to add a little bit of cadmium red into it and a little bit of crimson just to get a bit of a colour change. Coming down from that, I'm also going to have some more cobalt blue, just because I'm going to have that looking into the sea. I've got that reflection of the sky in there, so I want to make sure I've caught that. And then on the warm side, I've got cadmium red and I've got yellow ochre, which will really capture the warm nature of the sand, because the light is capturing the sand. And then I've got a little bit of purple, and that will more or less set the scene for the background. Now we're going to start from top to bottom and work our way down. I'm going to get to the sea in the distance, which is that gradiated wash all the way down, which is that Prussian blue and cobalt blue, which I'm going to bring down, add a little bit more cobalt blue as I come into the mid section, and then add a little bit of crimson as I get to the shallower water, and just drop that in while it's still damp. And I'm going to gradually work my way in. We are conscious that we've protected a lot of the highlights so that I can just put these big brush strokes in without worrying so much about the boat. So we've got that protected. I'm going to bring that down. As it moves from the damp, I'm just going to drop a few extra little bits of marks or 2 in there just to get that feeling of colour change, that tonal change. But now I'm going to gradually come down and work into the shallow water. I'm now going to come down with that cobalt blue on the left hand side, which is going to be really quite strong and just diffused on that bead of water. And I'm going to do something similar on the right hand side. Once I've set those in, I'm now going to put that punchy bright sand colour, drop that in. That's that one that we've set up with the yellow ochre and the cadmium red. Drop that in with a little bit of crimson in there as well, to be fair. Drop that in patches, but it's going to be done really quickly because I want to capture on the moisture, really. That's the absolutely important part. And as I come down, I'm now going to add some crimson and capture some deeper purple under the boat. So it's all, you can see the moisture, and hopefully you can see on the screen, you can see that reflection of the moisture coming through. But it's not so wet that it just diffuses away. It's just on the damp side. So I'm just gradually bringing these colours down. The reason why I'm able to do that is because I haven't wet the paper first. So I'm able to give myself that little bit more control. But once I paint a patch, I'm trying to just let it soak in and just bring it down. And as you can see, I'm adding a few more purples around that sand. I'm adding a little bit of blue in parts around the sand, just dropping it in and letting them diffuse together. The beauty is we're now capturing that reflective feel and that damp sand. If you can sort of get a sense of that as we come down. When I get to the bottom, I'm just adding a little bit more beach just to intensify it a little bit. And then I'm also going to add some blues and purples around there and just let them diffuse together. Just let them hang in there, diffuse together. Now I'm going to make some really stronger dark, which is going to be the really fun bit, which is going to be ultramarine blue, crimson, and a little bit of yellow ochre. And just make a dark, and then I'm going to splatter. I'm going to just splatter it. See my brush? Splatter it on. It's going onto that moist and damp surface. We're getting a series of random shapes, and I'm just going to shape them a little bit. Not too much, but just shape them. Do it really quickly so that we can just capture those shapes, let them diffuse and form. And then now while the sand is still wet, I'm just going to use that dark purple colour just to put into the bottom of the boat so that we can capture the plimsoll line of the boat. And I'm also going to extend it into the beach so it just diffuses into that damp sand while it's still there, and you'll see that it just diffuses in, and it just gives that feeling of though it's sitting on the beach with that little bit of shadow. I'm just dragging the brush over to the right hand side just to catch that secondary glow, and I'm also going to bring it down into the beach, into the water, just to capture that what is a little bit more wet sand, and as it comes across to the very drier sand, and you can just see that contrast between the two. Let it flow in, just let them soak in together and be as quick as I can, and then we'll leave it. While it's still on the moist, I'm just dropping a little bit of dark here and there. I'm going to splatter a little bit more on the foreground just to give it a little bit more lost and found edges and diffused effects of this seaweed that's just sitting on the surface. And then I'm also going to drop a little bit of odd marks or two into the sand just so that they just diffuse in, and I'm just going to go back and reinforce the bottom of the boat, and then that should really settle for this stage. Right, it's thoroughly dried now, and I've sort of set the scene now. I've got the background, and the key for me is that I've got all those colours. I can now move into the boat itself, knowing full well that the background is in place, so I'm not dazzled by the white paper. So what we're going to do first of all is just put some warmth highlights, which is going to be yellow ochre and a little bit of cadmium red, just pale, but just drop that in to the warm areas, which is going to capture the light. I'm also going to put a little bit of delicate paler blue as well, just for the shadows, just to give it a little bit of first stab at some tonal feel to the boats, just with this underwash, and just let that soak in, and then we'll let that dry. Now once I've got our initial tones in place, which just sort of setting the scene, I'm going to let those dry, and then I'm going to mix some, start with the top. I'm going to work some cadmium orange and cadmium red and put those lifebelts on the boat and put some of the highlights in place. I can also see I left some splatter marks in the sea a little bit higher up, so now it's dry, it's easy just to remove those just by putting a little bit of clear water and then just lifting it with my brush, and they'll disappear. Once again, do it when it's dry. It's easy to lift. Now I'm going to now look at the windows of the boats. They've got some secondary light coming through. It's quite a bit of yellow, so I'm using a little bit of cadmium yellow and a little bit of yellow ochre to drop that in, and then I'm going to work around with the blues, getting the more stronger colours for the interior of the boat, which is going to be cobalt blue and a little bit of Prussian blue mixed together, and just drop that in. Trying to be careful, there's a couple of tonal variations there, so I'm going to drop some colour in, lift it up in parts, leave a bits of white here and there, just generally working in the colours. Now I'm going to continue with the colours. In this case, it's going to be the blue on the side of the boat. This is in shade, so it's going to be a little bit deeper than the one in the background. I'm going to vary it as well as I go through, but I just want to protect some of the other areas, such as the buoy on the side of the boat and some of the sign. So just make sure I'm just painting it in the right areas. I'm also going to drop in some darks, just start building up some of the shadows on some of the aerials on the top of the boat and around the windows and in the windows as well, just to pick up that secondary light that's coming through and just work through the tones. So I'm starting from a very light tone, working now up into the darker tones and just generally working through the colours and the tones on the boat. Now that I've got the majority of the initial colours in, I'm starting to build up the shadows and the darks. Just using a range of colours that you can see on the right hand side of the palette, because I've got those purples, I've got those blues, I've got them darks at the bottom. I suppose to give you an overall feel, I'm using the purple for the mid-tones, and then I'm making some really strong dark, which is going to be basically ultramarine blue, bit of burnt umber or burnt sienna, and a little bit of crimson just to make an extra dark here and there. So I'm just gradually building up the tones. Now I'm just putting in a bit of shadow, trying to get that feel of the shadow. The light is coming from the left-hand side, cascading onto the face of the wheelhouse, but a lot of the boat is in shadow, and it just varies the amount of shadow. And the wheelhouse isn't quite fully square, so it's got a bit of an odd sort of shape to it. So hence why it's a little bit more in shadow in parts than others. So I'm just trying to vary that tone. I'm also going to add a little bit more colour to the front as well in parts, because there's an odd buoy here. There's a little bit of fishing buoys on the sides of the boats as well. I'm going to put those in. I've also got the fenders to put in, which are tyres basically on the sides of the boats, which they use to moor up and prevent it from bumping into things, just protect the boat. And I'm going to put those in using some of my strong darks and just let them flow. Try to pick up more the general shape of the collective shape rather than individual tyres, and then just put those in and let them diffuse together. Now I've got these two colourful buoys to go on the side of the boats, and there I'm going to use, one is a bit of an orange colour, which is a bit of cadmium orange and a bit of cadmium red, and the other one is more of a cadmium red. But because it's round, it's got that little bit of range of colour, I'm just going to put some strong colour and add a little bit of water, just so it diffuses and hopefully gives me that round spherical feel. Now we're letting it dry, and then we're going to remove the masking fluid, and that's by simply just rubbing on the surface, and it'll all hopefully disappear and it'll remove those highlight areas. Once again, masking fluid is never perfect, so I'm going to need to just repair some of these little areas and just give them a little bit more detail and a little bit more whiteness in parts, using a bit of Chinese white. After that, I'm then going to mix some more shadow and try to bring in that feeling of shape to the boat. This time I'm using cobalt blue, light red with a little bit of crimson in it. I'm going to just drop that into the side of the boat, side of the wheelhouse, but also the side of the hull of the boat. Now the boat hull is interesting because you've got a blue side, then you've got that little bit secondary light coming from the beach, and I'm going to use a little bit of cadmium red on there from the beach colour that we've got on the left, just to pick up that, so I get that colour range. Drop that in and let it diffuse. Okay, so now I'm adding some stronger dark to the bottom of the boat, just to the hull, but as I can see, oh, we're having a little bit of an accident or two. We've got this wash bleeding in to the paler blue of the side of the boat, and I won't leave this to dry, because it's not a hard edge I'm still after that diffuse sort of edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some water, clear water, with a separate brush, and then just use a bit of a paper towel, lift it off, and also use a bit of paper towel just to take that edge away. Hopefully that will mean that it will remove the diffused bleeding area, but leave it just with a diffused edge. And then I'm going to take that colour down into the beach, just to give that little bit of secondary glow to the wet sand, and I'm just going to bring that in parts, leave it in parts as well, so you get that little bit of depth of water, so you get that where it's really sort of a little bit deeper, and you get that more reflective. You'll see that reflection feel, and then I'll drop it in, just bring it down into the drier area with an edge or two, which will just give me that transition from really wet to just slightly damp sand. Now I'm just using my grey with a small brush just to shape up some of the marks that we've got in, which is the sand and the seaweed sort of on the surface of the sand. And I'm just using some dark just to create some harder edges in parts, just dropping it into the existing earlier diffused washes, and it'll just give some hard edges, and it'll just make that hopefully come to life that little bit more. So I'm now adding some more detail using the darks just to add that bit of extra definition. I'm also conscious that the side of the boat, the blue, it needs a bit more reinforcing. So I'm looking at the colours and also if we need a bit more reinforcing, I'm going to put some more colour into there just to make them stand out a little bit more. And we'll just gradually build that up and then we'll take another look at it. And then finally, I'm going to put some more tone onto the side of the boat with a lighter red, and then bring it round with the blue and put those marks, those plank lines on the side of the boat that really sort of give it that shape and feel. So there we have it. Pretty much got the shape of the boat. We've got the feel for the boat. We've got the setting. It's on the side of the harbour with that harbour water, also with the wet sand and the reflections from there. And hopefully we've got that mood and atmosphere with that early morning light coming across. And I hope you like it. Okay, so there we have it, the finished picture. I'll put a mount and obviously a frame around it, as you can see. And what we've tried to do, using this splattering and moisture, we tried to keep that diffused water, the diffused sand, and we did it in one pass, if you remember. And I think it's worked. I think we've caught it. I think I'm quite happy with the fact. So you can show you how we can utilise not just putting the colours into place and trying to diffuse and bring them down as washes, but also using some splattering to give an extra dynamic, trying to capture that wet sand with the stones on it and also the seaweed and the such like. It really sort of comes together. And this, just to add, well, this is another one I did of the same scene earlier in the week in a class actually this week. And as you can see, slightly bigger boat, but nonetheless, it still captures that mood and atmosphere with the sand. Now, I hope you've enjoyed that. It's been an interesting one to do, and let me know how you get on with it. Now, if you enjoyed this approach to mood and atmosphere and capturing these scenarios, in this case it's the wet sand, well, I've got a whole dedicated online course which takes you step by step through watercolour, and it takes you into these scenarios, understanding these techniques, breaking them down into simple steps, and it's putting them together. It really does give you confidence. It gives you a clear understanding of how to capture this type of approach to watercolour. And if you're interested, it's in the link below. And finally, a big thank you to all of you that are subscribed. We've got nearly 12,000 subscribers now, and we're only 13 months old, and it's been a wonderful journey for us to be able to sort of celebrate the wonders of watercolour. And of course, if you're new to the channel and you like this material, please don't forget, you know what I'm going to say, like and subscribe. It just gets picked up by a wider audience and it enables us to be able to do so much more. So, without further ado, all I'm going to say now is enjoy and keep painting.